When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at whatsapp.com.
Hi, it's Rich here. Just a reminder that 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, has been shortlisted for the category of Best Club Content Creator Premier League in the Football Content Awards 2025. We'd be really grateful if you're listening to this, if you'd take a bit of time to go to footballcontentawards.com/voting and give us your vote. Every vote counts, and we're really grateful to you for listening and for your support. Voting closes on the 12th of October, so get busy.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast with George Edwards.
Hello and welcome back to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and our match report following Forest's 2-0 defeat at St James's Park to Newcastle. That means it's 9 games without a win since that Brentford game that seems a very, very long time ago. I'm your host, George Edwards. I was at St James's Park and I was joined by Tom Newton, who rather favourably decided to miss this one. Probably a good decision in hindsight. And we'll get down to the managerial stuff and the game and the team selection in a second, but in terms of the overall performance, it was a very different performance from what we were expecting from an Ange Postecoglou side in terms of performance, selection and mentality. Forest went there really, it looked like, just to survive. The selection certainly seemed that way, and they really were more focused on defending, on keeping Newcastle out and maybe hitting them on the break, but certainly not what we've seen under Ange. I think Forest looked more comfortable playing that way, but in the end, 2 errors from Anderson and Gibbs-White cost Forest, and by the end I think Newcastle were the better side. So what were your overriding thoughts watching at home, Tom?
I think with the team selection, he played it safe, very reminiscent of, if you remember, Steve Cooper's game against Wolves. Could have got Tom 6-0 by Fulham in the previous game. Then he went to Wolves and played it very safe, pragmatic approach. Picked the players what he could trust in. So obviously Toffolo played in that game. He scored, didn't he, if you remember?
Yeah.
Obviously William played, Chiarte played, etc. And I think today was very reminiscent of that. I think he tried to pack it out in the defence, of obviously playing the 3 centre halves. And it was just a case of surviving in the game. And I think it's pretty bad if you look at it, because Ange's come in having this like certain approach. Within 8 games, he disregarded that and gone for a more like pragmatic, safe approach. And yeah, I just think he's like desperate to get a result and a performance. And I think if you look at that side, I think all the hallmarks are he just wanted to survive in the game and not get beat.
And Forest sacked Nuno, who's a defensive-minded coach. They brought Ange in, who's an attacking coach. And then, as you mentioned, within 7 games, Forest Ange has ripped that up and started again. So is that an acceptance from the club or Ange that changing it in this drastic way that was going so well before wasn't necessary, and it's sort of a permanent change whether Ange stays or not? Or do you think it was Ange really fighting for his job, thinking, I've got to get something from somewhere, and throwing whatever he could at it?
I think it's, with what you've said, I think it's all of those things. We got found out back end of last season, if you remember. We only needed a few points for a Champions League spot and didn't get it, did we? Because Nuno got found out in terms of like, we played Chelsea, and when they lost the ball, it was like getting 11 men behind the ball. So we knew that wasn't sustainable. So obviously he's come into this season, Nuno says not ready for this, that and the other, but we played against Brentford, played really well. And he was just probably like thinking, right, you've done really well against Brentford. We had a decent point away at Palace with all the connotations.
That was a really good point there.
Yeah, it does, with how Palace have been. I know they lost today at Everton, but you kind of think, well, the results, it's a results business first and foremost. And we got 4 points on the board from the first games, and you're thinking, right, with Nuno, sort all your baggage, what you've got, all your beef with Edu, and it never was sorted out. He ultimately got the bullet. Ange is coming in, and let's be honest, Ange hasn't come into like a side staring relegation in the face. He's come in, and at the time we looked okay. I mean, that 3-0 defeat at West Ham, it stunk the place out. But he's come in and he's like got some decent players at the club of obviously what they achieved last season. But he's come in, take the Arsenal game out. I think no manager was going to do anything in that game with the time he had. What was it, 2 days from him being appointed to the actual game? So take that out of the equation, because that was the start of we returned after the first international break, so he had no time to work with the players. But since then, apart from like a couple of halves of football where they've done all right, he hasn't got the result, has he? And it was only 10 days ago we played Real Betis in Seville. We absolutely blew them away with the best football I've seen from Forest side since I've been supporting the club. And this hasn't like lingered on for like 3 or 4 months, and obviously we've got into a tailspin of like not winning football matches. That was only 10 days ago. So the drop off of that performance, it's worrying, isn't it? That the players are just not buying into. They're saying that they're buying into Ange's philosophy, but it's not happening, is it? And how we've been playing, and then obviously the result last week, it's Michelin. It was meant to be one of the greatest nights in the club's recent history. That blew up in our faces of how Michelin played, get them through to, etc. There was apathy in the on the terraces, and today he's just tried to get a team, just see if it sticks, and ultimately it hasn't.
And we have looked okay under Ange. Like, as you mentioned, that Betis first half was really exciting, and you thought, wow, the potential in this team is very, very exciting. But since then, we've had 7 halves of football, and we've not merited anything from any of them, really. Two halves against Sunderland that were poor, very similar against Midtjylland, and then today we never looked like getting something. Does it matter that Ange hasn't had time? You know, because he's came in, as you mentioned, not much time before the Arsenal game, but really he's only had 3 training sessions max between games, because since he's came in, he's not had a midweek, and even when we come back from the international break, he's got Chelsea, then he's got Porto, and he's not really got a full week to work with the players. So do you think that time that he hasn't had matters? Or do you think as a professional footballer that he's working with as a manager, he should be able to convey the messages and work to his players' strengths better than he has?
He hasn't been helping himself out, obviously, with this gung-ho football of the inverted fullback and this, that and the other. He hasn't helped matters. I mean, obviously, he hasn't had many training sessions, but that's not disguising the fact that the goal what we conceded against Michelin, or the 2 goals what we conceded against Michelin. Yeah, exactly. And then the Sunderland one, that's just basics, isn't it? Whether the players are not taking on board what he's saying, but he did say, was it last season or the season before, when he got asked at Spurs, why don't you work on set pieces? And he says, I've got more other things to worry about. And you've got Arsenal, the institute of English football, and they've got a set piece coach. They spend a lot of time, obviously, practicing set pieces, and they've been very good at it. Why can't we do that? And it's obvious that there's not much like emphasis on that on the training ground kind of thing. And it's just like, at the moment, we've got to score 5 goals to have a chance of winning a football match, and we're shipping goals into a game, is it? And it's not good. And yeah, this performance there, I think it was just a matter of survival, and the team selection stated that. And I just think the club need to hold their hands up. We've made a mistake, and we need to make a change, because the longer this goes on, I've never seen a Forest manager in my lifetime, and probably before, of this calls on the terraces of like sacked in the morning and singing Nuno's name, where some people might think that was a line crossed, but not many managers have obviously turned it around and become a success. So when the fans are shouting from the terraces for a change of manager, the writing's on the wall. And I think in the next few days they need to sit down, and for the good of this season, because this should be like the greatest season in recent history, of sorting it out. And the longer this goes on, it's only going to get worse in my eyes.
And we mentioned it as well before recording that Ange just looks completely alone and helpless on the sideline. Do you think back to Nuno, and Nuno had all of his coaching staff behind him, you know exactly who they were, and when we scored a goal they were all hugging, and Cooper had Alan Tate and Andy Reid and people like that. I mean, I think we sort of know some of the names of Ange's coaching staff, but none of them have had any influence. And at the Midtjylland game, I sit in the Bright Glove stand. All the coaches for Midtjylland, the whole game, were up and commanding. Ange gets no support, doesn't want to sort of communicate with the coaches, and is almost just stood there, almost like he can't influence things. So he looks alone, and it's not a good look, is it? That?
Yeah, I mean, because I watched it at home, because obviously I had a family engagement today kind of thing, so I couldn't get to the game. But it was the first time in like 7 matches seeing Mario Jedinak, and he's like tucked in the dugout looking at an iPad. Whether we're watching it repeats of home and away, I don't know, but he's not doing a great job in my eyes. A bit like you say with Nuno's staff, and we don't want to keep going on about Nuno because obviously he's history now, but his staff was like they were involved, they were functioning, they were like together, and Steve Cooper was like this, and Nuno, they were all about unity kind of thing. And with things what Ange has been saying recently, he just says things which is like he'll just bore the piss of any fan kind of thing. He just doesn't. He's not a good fit. He's not a good fit. Let's put it that way.
And the thing I think is so opposite to them two, because those two would champion the fans. They'd do things in the community. Obviously, Ange doesn't have time to do things like that really yet, but they would always make a note to the fans at the end of the game. They'd always make a note of clapping them, applauding them. And then in the media, it's on the players. It's all about the players, and it's different because Ange is such a big personality, and he's been at bigger clubs than Forest. He's won bigger things than Forest. He is more of a well-known figure than Nuno and Cooper were. But you never got that with them two. And Ange sort of at the end, when the players came to clap us, Ange was stood at the back, not really fronting up to it. Yet he goes to the media the week before and says, "Oh, I knew I was going to get sacked at Tottenham, but I still won something." So arrogant. And, he's not done anything at Forest to back that up yet.
Yeah, and with the managers, the last manager who reminds me of being like this is Steve McLaren. Steve McLaren just didn't have that. Well, actually, Chris Hughton, but obviously the caveat in that we had COVID. Mm-hmm. So we was like struggling during COVID, and obviously we stayed up kind of thing without any fans being in the ground. So that was probably hard for him to have like a relationship with the fans. But Steve McLaren was the last one I can remember who didn't really have any empathy with the fans, and obviously that didn't last too long, did it? And so with Ange, it seemed very much about him kind of thing, and we're not that type of club. Everything's all built on family, and even the fan bases, or our fan base, and obviously the fan organisations. You've got the supporters trust. You've got Garibaldi. You've got various supporter groups who do come together, and for the greater club of Nottingham Forest come together in terms of what happened years ago with Farrell's when he fell on his sword kind of thing. So we are a very family orientated football club, but at the moment it's very fractious because Nuno's gone. Nobody wanted Nuno to go. It wasn't a result based sacking. It was obviously more internal. Ange's come in and he needed to hit the ground running. That hasn't happened. We're losing football matches. We're shipping goals to a game at the moment, and it's not a good place at the moment to support our club.
And it's amazing how we came from the last 4 years really of the unity that were built up between Cooper and the fans, Nuno and the fans, and all the players and the coaching staff, and it almost overnight it's completely evaporated. Let's turn our attention back to the Newcastle game then and the team selection. So we made 4 changes from the Midtjylland game. Cunha, Yates, Savona and Wood came in to start. So we had Matt Sells in goal, Morato, Milenkovic and Cunha the back 3, with Williams and Savona the wing backs, Anderson and Yates in midfield, with Gibbs, White, Endoy and Wood the front 3. Now, obviously, a lot spoken about the team selection. It's the same formation as what he deployed against Midtjylland, but obviously with Cunha coming in for Murillo and Yates in midfield, it looks like a lot more of a defensive setup, and looks like they've gone there to get a point, really. And Yates, coming back into the side, he always finds a way to worm his way back into manager selections, whether they pick him from the start or whether when things get tough. Yates, he always finds a way in, and I thought he performed admirably. And it was one of the most sort of gritty and heartfelt performances that Forest have had this season. No surprise that it was when Yates came in, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get that from Yates. What he lacks in ability, he has determination. Whether that's enough in the Premier League, I don't know, but I thought Ibrahim Sangai had a good game getting to Midtjylland, and some of his passing broke the lines. And there was one pass where he took 5 Midtjylland players out of the game for a through ball for Chris Wood, and he he didn't get on the pitch today. James McAtee didn't get on the pitch today. I know he obviously hasn't hit the ground running yet. And obviously Nicholas Dominguez started last week against Sunderland. He doesn't
Not seen him.
But then Yates played kind of thing. So yeah, like I said earlier, it was a very safe team selection by Ange. I think he's gone in there and got like players who he can trust, kind of thing. But I think with Ange being pragmatic, he's took the attacking element out of the game. We look more assured, let's say, but we was never going to like Newcastle. I mean, Chris Wood in the first half, he had that half chance for Chris Wood last season. He buries it, doesn't he? And he's lacking a bit of confidence. I know he scored penalties against Michelin, but the game was never done and dusted by then in Michelin's favour. And then Gibbs White, he had a chance, didn't he, with the free kick, which I hope should be saving that, to be honest. So yeah, like I said, the pragmatic approach has took any attacking threat, and if you look at their back 4, 5, including the goalkeeper, they've had a very comfortable afternoon, haven't they?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of how the game started, I think we wondered whether Ange would have something up his sleeve or if he would go more pragmatic. But as you mentioned, that's exactly how it was. And Newcastle had a few chances early on. Joelinton had a shot that was straight at Sales after Trippier's ball in. And then Forest had more carnage from a corner. After 15 minutes, they lost 2 headers, with Byrne and Joelinton both winning a header from a corner and Sales keeping them both out. I think as a fan in the away end, I felt a bit more assured by the defensive start that Forest made. They looked more assured. They looked certainly more comfortable. And I think that was probably the most comfortable 90-minute performance under Ange. It doesn't look good because we've lost, and maybe you could say that against Burnley, but there's obviously a difference in opposition there. But the players looked comfortable with what they were being asked to do, which they haven't always done under Ange. So I guess you could say that's progress. Yeah, you mentioned the 2 chances there. I think Wood could have maybe done better, but it's a fizzed ball in from Gibbs White from the right. And that was where Forest were targeting, really. I think Ange set them up to dominate in the air and try and sort of target that, because that's Newcastle's strength. They've got tall, dominant midfielders, and they've got Woltemade, Byrne, Botman, Thor coming up for corners. So they were always going to be a threat in the air, set them up reasonably well, hard to beat, and then trying to beat them in the wide areas. In terms of how the back 5 performed, Tom, we mentioned the chances, and that was really it, what we spoke about in the half. I thought Milenkovic really played well, and Woltemade, apart from in the second half when Morato passed in the ball and Sales made the save, and obviously the penalty from open play, Woltemade really didn't have a sniff, and that was down to Milenkovic doing a really good job on him. I thought Morato had a few erratic moments, as he often does, but the more minutes he gets, he looks more solid. Cunha, for a Premier League debut, couldn't really ask much more from him. And then I think we're still unsure about Savona, but Williams put in his standard performance. Ilanga only put a few balls in, and we defended that really well. So in terms of a back 5 as a unit, obviously they had a lot more protection than normal, but a solid display, shall we say.
Yeah, it was solid, but whatever they were clearing, the balls keep coming back because just couldn't keep it in the final third. So yeah, you want your defenders to defend, but then you want them to have a bit of like respite kind of thing, and that wasn't really happening. I mean, Wood was like Botman was around him, Thor was around him, and ball just wasn't sticking. And I think with Guimarães in there and Joelinton in there, we didn't match the physicality in the midfield, etc. So yeah, the ball was keep coming back, and I don't want to sound like I told you so or anything like that, but I just think it was just a sense of inevitability that they will find a way with the quality they've got on the pitch. But let's be honest, we set up today like a championship team who've got a plum draw in the FA Cup trying to like survive, and we tried to do this a few years ago. The first season back in the Premier League, we're playing Newcastle first game of the season. It was just survival mode, and I thought as a football club we've gone past that. We're better, we're more established, but I just felt today that we've regressed, and we're going there just to survive in a football match. And with the money spent, and obviously where we finished last season, I just think we should be doing more against Newcastle. I know we've got problems, I know that, and they're in the Champions League, and they've got really good players like Woltemade and Gordon, etc. But let's be honest, we didn't really lay a glove on them, and we look more solid defensively, but attacking sense, yeah, their back 5 hasn't broke sweat this afternoon.
Yeah, that return to the Premier League and when we played Newcastle was a real eye-opener as to the fact that this was maybe a lot more than we could have seen, maybe a bit enough more we could chew, and it was going to be a real struggle of a season with the fact that we played Newcastle and, we only lost 2-0, but we got completely dominated and outclassed. But since then, we've improved and came on leaps and bounds as a football club. That was 4 years ago. We've made so many good signings. We've gone through 2 managers. We've finished in the European places. We've been to Newcastle even, 18 months ago on Boxing Day and won 3-1 and thoroughly deserved that, which really kick-started Nuno's reign. And then 4 years later, we're back to that same situation where we look completely out of our depth and we look like really we can't get anything out of the game. And even if we got a goal, Newcastle could step it up and get another 2 within 5 or 6 minutes. So it was a real eye-opener as to what is going wrong at the football club. And you would not have expected that performance from a Forest side. We're no longer that promoted side who looks like we've won a competition. We are here. We're a European worthy team. We're a side that is expecting to finish in Europe at the start of the season, no doubt. Yet we're now back to square one. So it's very shocking how quick that reality has set in. If you thought the first half was negative, after the break, we're going to get on to the second half. But at half time, it was Newcastle 0, Forest 0.
The 1865 Match Report.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
On to the second half then, and it was a solid-ish start from Forest, but Newcastle sort of started to set it up. I think Forest got a bit tired, and when you're playing this way, you've got to be focused for 90 minutes. It's easy to lose concentration when you think you're sort of coasting in a match, which I think Forest thought they were. They were reasonably comfortable, but Newcastle stepped it up. Gordon had a chance down the left. Got the ball in and it was misjudged, as I mentioned. Then Morato sliced it straight to Woltemade, who had a shot that was smothered by Sells. Sells did quite well there. But then 5 minutes later, the inevitable thing that we all thought would happen did happen. 58 minutes in? Forest sort of half clear. Savona drives away after a set piece, but it's a poorish ball for Gibbs White, but he's surrounded by Byrne and Guimarães. Quite clearly, I think he could see them both, and he tries a ridiculous, silly turn that he often does, turn straight into Guimarães. And in the stadium, I didn't think that was a foul. I've not seen a replay, but I thought Guimarães won the ball, got it away to Byrne. Then he got it back from him, drove towards goal. The whole defence backs off him at that point. It's sort of a back five at Yates, backing off him, inviting the shot. And Guimarães just keeps running. And then as he gets to the edge of the D, curls it into the top right corner and gives Newcastle the lead, Tom. Don't think it was a foul from Guimarães from my vantage point, and the goal that we all saw coming.
Yeah, it was definitely not a foul. He's picked his pocket. You knew what Gibbs White was going to do. He's boiling my piss at the moment, where he's trying to do these extravagant flicks, and he's playing it blind. And with the situation we're in, we've got to keep hold of the football kind of thing. He tried to flick it down the corner. He's had his pocket pick because Guimarães wins the ball, then obviously Clyde's in to Gibbs White. It's never a foul in a million years. Anybody who's saying that's a foul needs to have a reread of the rules. But I just thought that the defence backs off and basically saying to Guimarães, go and pick your spot. He's picked his spot, and I'm going to sound a bit controversial here, and I think he had an unbelievable season last year, and I just think he's a bit susceptible at the moment. And I don't know if that's a confidence thing of how we've been asked to play in terms of playing it out from the back, but I just think Sells doesn't seem as assured as he was last season. And I mean, if you go back to the game in February when we played Brighton and he had that unbelievable save, I think it got saved of the month, didn't it? When he's tipped on the ball from Danny Welbeck, he had no right to save that. I just think, and there's going to be somebody out there who's played in goal. I've played in goal and but no higher than Sunday League level. I think he should be saving that because he hasn't put it in which much power, has he? He hasn't whipped it in. He just feathered it into the top corner. And I mean, I don't want to criticise Sells too much because he has kept us in the game again today with some decent saves. He did the same against Michelin with that one-on-one, but I think he should be doing a bit better than that. But if he saves that, I think they're going to find another way of opening the scoring because I just think they had quality in abundance today, and they could have gone up with a few more gears, and they just did enough and kept us at arm's length. But yeah, I think Gibbs White's got to do better. The defence has got to do better. Then thirdly, I think Sell could be doing better, but some people think I'm probably being harsh, but that's just my opinion, and football is all about opinions.
Yeah, certainly. So Forest responded quite well to going behind, to be fair. They got forward in moments. They had a chance with Wood. I thought he should have done a lot better with it. Savona's ball in deep to the back post. Wood on the volley makes a complete hash of it and does nothing with it, really. While we're talking about Wood, how do we get him firing? Because he obviously scored that penalty goal against Midtjylland that was pretty insignificant. But he's looked a shadow of himself, particularly since Ange came in. I think you've got to find a way to play to his strengths, and he has looked good. He came on against Midtjylland, and suddenly Forest had a threat. We scored 2 offside goals, obviously, that Wood netted. He looked confident in their moments, and he knows where to be to score goals. But the ball that came in from Gibbs White in the first half, yes, he miscontrols it, but last season he didn't need a full chance to score, did he? So how do we get him firing again?
I think it's down to if he plays. He's not having any cohesion with who he's playing with because he keeps swapping his wingers all the time, doesn't he? Like last season, it's like you had Wood, Hudson-Odoi, Alanga, and I know Alanga's not there anymore, and Gibbs White. So there's kind of chemistry. But if you keep swapping your wingers every 5 minutes and not giving Wood enough time to play with these wingers, he's going to be one of those where you just don't know when the ball's going to come in because you've not played with a long time with these players. So he's kind of he probably is making the right runs, but the players are probably not used to Chris Wood and they're not finding him, etc. And hence why he's probably he seems a bit anonymous at the moment of chances. He's having to rely on scraps, and that's not Chris Wood's game. It's usually last season, he might have 1 or 2 good chances in the game, he puts it away, and he's just trying to survive on crumbs at the moment. And like the cross in the first half, where last season he sticks that way, doesn't he? A half chance is a good chance for Chris Wood. And this year he just hasn't got that mojo because he doesn't know when the ball's coming in because he's playing, because Ange keeps changing the wingers all the time. And I mean, look at the start of the season, the goals what he scored because they've put a ball in an area where Chris Wood's going to be. And he scored 2 goals against Brentford. And now he's, like I says, now he doesn't know when the ball's going to come in because he's playing with different wingers each week. And he's not getting that cohesion with them. So they need to play with his strengths because that's the only way you're going to get the best out of Chris Wood.
I'm talking about all the change Ange's made. He did make a few subs just after Forest went behind. Wood, Ndoye and Yates all went off. Jesus, Hutchinson and Hudson-Odoi came on. I think there was a feeling that Forest was starting to purr and maybe could have put a couple of subs on to try and help it. But the change really killed Forest, to be fair. They lost all physicality in midfield and up front. You think of Ndoye, Yates and Wood, 3 very physical players for the positions they play in, replaced with Jesus, Hutchinson and Hudson-Odoi. Obviously means Gibbs White dropping into midfield. It's a very different setup, and Forest were actually playing well up until that point in that 5-minute spell. But it completely killed it. I was disappointed with Hudson-Odoi the most. He beat Trippier a couple of times, but never really looked like influencing the game at all. And as your more experienced, most reliable winger, sort of really the main winger at Forest, you're expecting a lot more from him coming off the bench. So what was your thoughts on the substitutions? Because they killed it for me.
I think it was the last chance to live for Ange. I think it was just a matter of let's chuck as many attacking players on as we can and see if we can get a smidge of a chance. And as soon as you do that, obviously, Boyce left themselves more open. The midfield was more open. That invited more pressure on the back 5 or the back 4 because obviously he changed it, didn't he, to put an extra man in midfield. So I think it's just smacks of desperation at the moment with Ange. He's trying to get a squad together or a starting 11 together to get him a result. That's not happening. You go a goal behind. And at the moment, I mean, he has said things in the past when he was at Spurs, I don't do this in terms of, I don't practice set pieces because there's more other things to worry about, etc. He's just, at the moment, we have to score 5 goals to have a chance of winning a football match. And that is the reality because we're shipping goals in at the other end. I know was probably a bit more sounder in with the defensively today, but no, he's desperate for a result, isn't he? And then if you look at his team selection, that just smacks of desperation from him. So yeah, it's not. He's got a lot of problems at the moment, and whether he's the man to solve it, I'm not so sure.
I think we know that a lot of fans really aren't so sure. Newcastle stepped it back up again after Forest sort of half spell in the match. Woltemade hit the bar. Sells had to save from Tonali. Then he had to make a double save from Thor and Barnes just to keep it at one, really. Forest just looked completely open. But the second did come. It was the customary St James's Park penalty. We seem to always concede a penalty there. Anderson, I mean, from the view I had, I thought Anderson didn't know Guimarães was there and sort of just went for the ball and it wasn't there. But looking at a replay, I saw it on Twitter, the incident, and I thought he could see him coming, feel him coming. All he had to do was stay on his feet or stay goal side of him. Instead, he lunges in against his hometown club and concedes that penalty. Then we saw, I don't know if you guys saw it on TV, but in the stadium it was visible that Matt Sells then sprinted across to the bench, I'm assuming to get information as to where the penalty was going to go. He then takes quite a long time to get back in goal, but once he is there, Nick Woltemade gives him absolutely no chance, sticks it in the top left corner, and by that point, Tom, that was everything Newcastle deserved.
Yeah, I think with Anderson, he's panicked, hasn't he? And he's lunged in. I think he was probably going to get the free kick or whatever, and obviously he's got it dreadfully wrong. But it's a penalty all day long. And then the other bit, which is boiling my piss, is that Sells has run over to the dugout. As you alluded to, you might be wrong, you might be right, I don't know, but let's assume that he's gone over there to get information of where Woltemade is going to stick this penalty. I think that's poor preparation from the coaching staff. If that's true, that he has to go over there, because if I was the goalkeeping coach, and I'm not saying I've got any coaching badges or anything like that, I would have got all the information needed for my goalkeeper to go into that game today prepared. So I would have obviously picked the penalties what they've took from this season and last season. 9 times out of 10, the penalties last season would have been from Alexander Isak. I know he's gone to Liverpool now, but I would have looked at who's been taking the penalties. So Woltemade, Joe Linton, because he missed a penalty, if you remember, last year in the League Cup. So you would have given your goalkeeper that preparation, so he didn't need to go to the bench if he had the right information, if we're assuming that's the case. So I just think it's poor preparation from the coaching staff. If he's had to do that, then let's be honest, free keepers are not saving that penalty. He's really whipped it in that top corner. It's a brilliant penalty, and Sells has got no chance. But I just think a lot of things we're looking more in depth of the things going wrong, and we're looking for like certain bits of why it's not working. And if it's a preparation thing, like the player's not properly prepared, I mean, we might be wrong on this, but yeah, if that's the case with Sells, that he's had to go to the bench and ask where Woltemade is going to stick this penalty, I think it's a bit poor preparation. But it's not only just that, there's other factors. Like I said, set pieces, we did okay today. We had an extra man in there, but in the previous few games, set pieces have been bloody awful. It's basic errors, isn't it? It's schoolboy stuff. And like I said a second ago, I don't know if Ange is going to solve these problems. I don't believe in him. I think it's an experiment what's gone dreadfully wrong, and the club just need to hold their hands up now and think, right, we've made a mistake. There's still a lot of the season to go at. It's still salvageable. We're still in Europe. We're not in the relegation zone. We've made a mistake. You got this international period now, but yeah, I know we're going to be a laughing stock if that does happen with the media. They're going to have a field day with us. That with obviously. We're going to have a third manager of the season. We're not even at Christmas yet, but that's the reality in the situation we're in at the moment. We've made a dreadful mistake in getting Ange in because of everything what Nuno achieved last year. We know he instigated his sacking, but we're getting a manager in here. If it wasn't for Ipswich, Southampton, Leicester being crap, Spurs would have gone down £1 billion institution, and he was obviously the captain of it, if you know what I mean. He was heading that ship.
And the thing is, they obviously got to the Europa League final and won it. Had they lost that one game, almost certainly Ange wouldn't have been here. So he's here based on one game. Exactly.
And he hasn't got lucky in terms of he's shit the bed against like PSG or somebody like that. They played against a poor Man United side who we know they've got huge problems, and that's been going on for a good few years now. So yeah, it's the two crap teams in a final. They won it, and like you say, we've pointed in on one game, and because they basically chucked in the Premier League thinking, oh, we'll be okay because it's 3 worse teams than us. But we can't afford to do that this season because
Yeah.
the three teams that will come up. I know Burnley have been tonked today at Villa, and the loss the other week at home was at Man City or somebody like that. But they've been better than the other three teams that were in the Premier League last year who went down. Sunderland are having a really good go. I know they lost yesterday at Man United, but they've done all right. Leeds have held their own. They did all right against Spurs yesterday. So, yeah, we can't afford to just toss the Premier League off because the teams that have been promoted this season are better than what's gone down last season. So, yeah, and like you say, we're just basing this Ange appointment on one game in an awful final, and but yeah, we're just the hierarchy just gonna sit down, all be in agreement that we've made a mistake. Hopefully, Ange would like to say, "Look, it's not working at my end either." Just mutually terminate his contract in the next few days and get somebody in who's the right fit.
Yeah. Now, we're going to talk more about Ange in a second, but now at full time of score of 2-0, we're going to get a view from the opposition from Jack, Toon Down Under.
Hello, it's Jack from the Toon Under Podcast in Australia. This was a really big game for Newcastle. We've obviously had a bit of faltering league form. We've been playing quite well, but we've only won one game before this, so this was a really important game. We had a bit of a confidence booster from the Champions League game in midweek, which was probably the opposite of Forest's experience. So this was really important for us. The game last season was obviously very eventful, the 4-3. So I didn't feel like it was going to be another game like that. We've done well defensively this season. And obviously there's all of the noise around Ange and all of the Forest news that's been going on that we've been following. I never feel comfortable playing Forest, though. Forest's got some good players still. Obviously, Elliot Anderson being the main one that we have a special interest in. He's a fantastic player, and it's so good to see him doing so well. But in terms of the game, I think the first half was very poor, probably from both teams, really. There wasn't a lot of quality on the ball. It felt like it could be another frustrating 0-0 for Newcastle. We've had 3 0-0s so far this season, and Forest were actually quite defensive, I think. Kind of opposite of what Ange has got his reputation for. But they set up in that that block. It was quite hard to break down in the first half. But the second half, I think our quality showed. Bruno had one of his Bruno games where he's just absolutely phenomenal in the second half. So I think once he scored his goal, it was probably only going to end one way. I didn't really feel threatened really by Forest after that point. So to summarise, I'd just say first half poor, second half really good. And the performance has been kind of coming with our attack. We've been waiting to click a bit. Woltemade is obviously an exciting player. We haven't seen too much from Anthony Elanga yet. I thought he had another quiet game. But that penalty from Woltemade was remarkable. So yeah, some good performances from us. It's hard to avoid all of the Forest news going on and Ange and everything. And yeah, I hope that they get sorted. It's Forest a good club, and hopefully Forest can come back and get a manager if Ange does go that suits them and that everyone feels happy with. So good result for us. I know it was a poor one for Forest, and we'll see what happens in the return game later this season. Cheers.
The 1865 Match Report.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Thanks, Jack. Now let's pick up on Ange again. And I mean, I've never been behind the appointment, to be honest. Obviously, it was hard to get behind the sacking of Nuno, but we all thought it had to happen. And it's a very difficult job for anybody coming in on the back of Nuno, who was adored by Forest on the back of 4 years of unity. And if Forest going in the same direction, we've always been a counter-attacking side. So Ange coming in, that's an expectation, really, that appointment, that Forest need to progress. They need to have more of the ball, and they need to assert themselves in a different way. So it's no surprise it's gone that way. I was surprised that he sort of abandoned that style so soon on into his tenure. And I personally think he probably will be given a bit longer, because I can't see Marinakis admitting he's made a mistake this soon. But he really has got to turn it around a bit sooner, because you look forward and you can't picture where a win's coming from. We've got Bournemouth, Chelsea, Man United, Leeds even in the league that looks quite a difficult fixture. It's at home, but I'm not confident we're going to beat Leeds. And in between that, we've got Porto, who have in the league won all 8 games, I think, this season, only conceded once, top of the Europa League as well. And Sturm Graz, who have done okay in the Europa League. I think they picked up a few points or something. So not an easy run by any stretch of the imagination. And Forest can't afford for this sort of short-term drop-off to become a long-term thing, because as you mentioned, we could become in the abyss. You look at Leicester, as you said earlier, who unexpectedly went down, and then they're the yo-yo side, they're back in the Championship, they're only third, they're in disarray. We can't have that happen to us because of how long we were out of there for. So as much as we both really agree that Ange possibly isn't the answer, do you think Marinakis will pull the plug this international break? Because we spoke on the West Ham pod before the last one, and you caught it right. So everybody's basking on your last words here, Tom.
I think for the good of the season, he has to go now, because I don't think it's going to get any better, because obviously the fans have spoken in terms of when that third goal went in against us, against Midtjylland. No manager in my lifetime's turned that atmosphere and that apathy around. I think I'm not saying this current situation is as bad as like the Joe Kinnear or Gary Megson days, but when the fans were saying, chanting Megson out or Kinnear out and things like that, they did fall on the sword and they did leave, kind of thing. I'm not saying it. Things improved because obviously we went down that season, but yeah, I think if Mr. Marinakis wants to save this season, I think he's got to act now and just hold his hands up and made a mistake. And I think largely the Forest fans will be more respectful to him if he holds his hands up and makes a mistake, rather than letting it linger on. And then come the next international break, we're in a tailspin in terms of in a relegation battle. So at the moment, just you're strongest in your first 6 weeks of an appointment, aren't you? Just hold your hands up. Say you made a mistake, and obviously have some like joined up thinking with Edu. I know Edu's probably been like the absolute catalyst of this mess what we've been in the last recent months, if you listen to certain people. But you need to have some joined up thinking with Ross Wilson, Edu, Mr. Marinakis, of the best manager to get the best out of these players and have the best philosophy and best playing style, because there's no point like bringing in somebody completely against the grain if the players aren't going to adapt what's happening now, kind of thing. So yeah, I think, to answer your question, yeah, I think he's got to go. I think he can't turn this around.
Yeah, and we know the fans have voice as well. You look at, they kept Cooper in their job for so long. He obviously knew the affection we had with Nuno, but had to cut that loose. But even before, he's done a lot with the fans. Obviously, you mentioned earlier we forced Fowers out of the club. So we do have influence. It's whether Marinakis wants to put his own decision over what the fans think is right, or whether he thinks he is thoroughly right in what he's done. In terms of the players, Tom, they've come out in interviews, and you sort of don't really know what to read into it. But we know how much they bought into what Nuno was trying to do and to what Cooper did before then. Do you think they are still playing for him, or do you think they look lost? Because a lot of them look lost trying to play the way he wants us to play.
I think they look lost. They're not going to come out in the media and obviously go completely against the grain of. They're not going to say, "Oh, I don't like Ange. Ange is this, Ange is that." There's obviously they're all media trained now. They're always going to piece it together that it's going to look good from the outside, but I think the most damning indictment in this is that only 10 days ago we played Real Betis in Seville. First 45 minutes was unbelievable. The best football I've seen supporting this club in 30 years. And this hasn't been like lingering on for like 3 or 4 months since that game where we were like not been getting results. That was only 10 days ago. They played that well 10 days ago to put the performances in what they have been doing against Sunderland, Midtjylland and Newcastle today. Yeah, it's something. They don't buy into what Ange is trying to do here, and obviously, like I said earlier, his team selection suggests that it's just a matter of like seeing what sticks. Then we go a goal down. He's trying to stick as many attacking players on and trying to get a goal that way, and obviously it's leaving huge gaps in the midfield. And other teams are like getting a second and third goal up, etc. like Michelin did the other night. Yeah, I just think he's done. Whether the change happens in the next few days remains to be seen, but it has to be done because it's not working.
And just before we go, if he is still here come the Chelsea game and come the next period of games, he's obviously changed his style today and he's tried to be more pragmatic and play a way that looks like he can get points and that the players know. If he's still here, do you think he sticks with that long term? Or do you think that really is him just at his last chance saloon? And if things start to go in his favour, if he's given more time, he'll revert back to his type?
I really don't know, because in 8 games, it's been very wishy-washy. 1 minute we're playing like brilliant, like amazing football. And the next minute we can't defend. Next minute he's like changing his style. I really don't know. And this is all in like 7 games, 8 games. I don't think he knows what he actually wants, how he wants us to play, because obviously he's tried one style already. We didn't get results. He's changed it again today, didn't get the result. And then I just think there's a confidence crisis in the players now. I just think, like we alluded to it earlier, that chance what Chris Wood has last season, a half chance is a good chance for Chris Wood. And if you watch Sells today, he looks a bit susceptible, doesn't he? He doesn't look as assured. There was one where at the Gallagher end where Milenkovic is like saying, "You're coming for this,"
waiting for him to come, and he doesn't.
And he doesn't, and he only had to pounce on it. And there was a one in the first half where, I mean, he made a good save on Jodland, and I think that is a good save. But there was one where it's like, that 6-yard box is yours. You go and be the boss in that 6-yard box, and he's not doing that at the moment. But having said that, and I mean the goal today, I think he should do better with the first goal, etc. And he has kept us in games. Some of the unbelievable. If it wasn't for him today, it would have been 4-0. Let's get it right. But I just think there's a massive confidence crisis in the whole starting 11 and the subs what come on, because we're not getting results. Like if you look last year, it was like was winning games of football, so we was oozing confidence. We're going to like places like Anfield, and that Anfield result where we won 1-0, that was the catalyst. That was the springboard of how I know we lost a few times over that period up until Christmas. I mean, we lost against Arsenal, lost against Fulham, etc. But that was the catalyst, thinking we can go to these places and actually lay a glove on these top sides. And yeah, I've gone to Newcastle today and they haven't broke sweat after. Let's get it right. It's just like that back five of Newcastle, they haven't broke sweat. Pope hasn't really had a lot to do. And Ange is saying we're creating chances, but even against Sunderland last week, the saves what their goalkeeper made, he should be saving them.
Yeah.
So it's things like that which, we've got a lot of problems at the moment, and it's just sad, isn't it, that Nuno's got the sack for a non-result based decision. We've got Ange in, he hasn't got results, and the fans don't want him here. Then the season, like I said, it's still salvageable, but what should be the best season in a generation, it's going to shit, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's Nottingham Forest and we shouldn't be surprised by anything. And you mentioned that Anfield was the catalyst to Nuno ball, really. I think Ange's tenure Forest's tenure under Ange has been defined by that Swansea game. Since then, that's really set a precedent to what we've seen. And thanks for joining me, Tom, and thanks, Jack, for the view from the opposition. We'll be back the other side of the international break for more match reports. In the meantime, you'll get Football Terrorists next week, and cheer up, you get 2 weeks without watching Forest play. Thank you for listening. You can find all the links to the podcast and where to listen to it at the words 1865.football. Have a good international break, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Just a reminder that 1865 has been shortlisted for the category of Best Club Content Creator Premier League in the Football Content Awards 2025. Go to footballcontentawards.com/voting. Voting closes on the 12th of October.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.